Hello, and welcome to today's live chapter reading of This Time Around by Jane Suen, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Katie raised the airplane window shade, gazing at the gray landscape as the plane taxied down the runway. The magic of flying never got old. The takeoff was her favorite part of the flight, hearing the roar of the engines, feeling the thrust and shake of the aircraft, and the thrill of becoming airborne. It had never ceased to amaze her. After high school, she got accepted to college and moved to the city and stayed there after she graduated. She jumped at the offer of an entry level job at a multinational corporation when the recruiter mentioned a myriad of opportunities for growth. But her sister, Mary, had remained in the small town where they grew up when Dad died 2 years ago, and Mama had been heartbroken. What would you like to drink? The airline hostess stood in the aisle, positioning the beverage cart. Katie sat up in her seat and released the tray table, pulling it down. Just coffee, please, she nodded, giving a grateful smile and hiding a yawn. Coffee sounded great. She'd rushed to the airport this morning, barely making it in time. Last night, Katie had less than 4 hours of sleep. She'd worked in a frenzy to finish her report and click the send button in her email. Her demanding boss had made a last minute assignment, adding it to her list of tasks to do before she could leave. This job had started out as a dream job, and she had high hopes when Alan hired her. He was a wonderful manager, and he was well liked and respected by everyone. Everyone except the conniving bitch from hell who plotted Alan's downfall to get his position. This bitch from hell became the boss from hell. Her new nickname was BFH after she took over his job. Poor Alan never suspected. Sure, some people had their suspicions and passed hints his way, but Alan was so trusting of this woman who hid behind her facade, stabbing him in the back as she beguiled him with her fake, poisonous smiles. Katie had defended him early on, but when lies piled on lies, it spread. Thus, some people believed the lies that the BFH seeded far and wide like planting grass. One never knew which roots would take hold. Katie witnessed her underhanded tactics, abuses, and taking credit for other people's good work firsthand. Crackers? The hostess handed over the coffee cup. No, thank you, Katie said, pushing away her thoughts to take the coffee, cupping both hands around the warm container. She sipped the weak coffee for a while and then gulped the rest of her drink quickly, locking the tray table back up as the captain announced the descent from cruising altitude. They would land in about 20 minutes. Katie had gotten the wedding invitation from her hometown friend Lori weeks ago. She had tossed it on the mantel, meaning to RSVP later. It got buried under the bills and junk mail. Long hours on the job and other things in life took all her time and energy. She'd simply forgotten until 2 days ago when she was going through her bills, writing checks, and came across Lori's invitation. It was too late to mail in the engraved RSVP. The date of the wedding was this coming Saturday. She didn't think she would go, hadn't planned on it, didn't have a +1, but a voice grabbed her and wouldn't let it out of her mind. It was insistent, pushy, telling her not to let the BFH rob her of this wedding. Katie alternated between fury, disappointment, and fear. Finally, she picked up the phone and called her sister. Mary wouldn't take no for an answer. She said she had to come. Besides, she convinced Katie she'd get there faster on the plane than mailing the RSVP. Had she missed home? The last time she'd been back was during the holidays, a few months ago. She'd brought her work home then and wasted her precious vacation time meeting the incessant demands of her BFH. She gritted her teeth. This time, it was going to be different. Coming home was a wake up call. Family mattered, her mom and sister. Other people mattered too, but with time, some had become distant memories. She remembered the invitation to her 10th high school reunion. She had wanted to go back, but the BFH stole it from her. Time she'd lost forever and would never get back. Katie let out a heavy sigh. She fumbled for the seatbelt strap and pulled it, inserting the metal tab into the buckle as the fasten your seatbelt sign came on. Katie had packed light, one bag. Her clothes still hung in the closet in her bedroom the way she left them. Her mom kept her old room much the same way. She didn't need to bring hardly anything. As she wheeled her one suitcase to the waiting area, she spotted her sister. Katie, Mary squealed, running to greet her, beaming a warm, welcoming smile, her arms opened wide. Katie rushed into them, burying her face in Mary's shoulder. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had missed her sister. It was almost like old times. At 29, Mary was 1 year older. She was the dependable one. If Mary said she'd be there, Katie could count on her. They'd been close growing up. When Mary got her first job, she was ecstatic. Soon after, she found an apartment about 5 minutes from her parents' house and moved in. It was small, but bright and airy. Windows overlooked a courtyard. The backyard had enough room to put up clothing lines. Mary hung her clothes to dry outside. She liked the way the clothes smelled like fresh air and sunshine. She loved her little apartment, and she was proud to afford it on her waitress salary. Mary had taken classes at the community college while she worked. She could take only one course per semester, but she was in no hurry. Eventually, she'd had enough credits to graduate. Katie had flown home for Mary's graduation. She was proud of her older sister. Her parents were too. It was the last time all of them were together, and they had a group picture taken. Katie kept a framed copy on top of her bedroom dresser. How was your trip? Good. I could have used more sleep last night, Katie said, giving in to another yawn. It was unlike her to complain, yet she felt she had every right. She had given her all to her job. It sucked every bit of her energy. At night, she'd drag herself home with barely enough energy to prepare dinner. The same scene played out every time, like a rote robot. She'd reach for the frozen dinner in the freezer and pop it in the microwave. By the time she washed up and changed into something comfier, dinner was ready. The tray was more interesting than the food sometimes, as the food tasted as boring as it was nondescript. It was something to stick a fork in and shove into her mouth. The best part? There was no dishes to wash. To make it easy on herself, she'd rotate the frozen trays with the freshest on the bottom. It saved her from checking the expiration date each time. She only had to get the one at the top. Truth be told, she had microwaved food without checking the date when she was too tired to notice and too hungry to care. If it didn't taste funny, she'd eat it. Her life was orderly. The only thing that changed was the expiration date on each day's meal. Katie sighed, thinking how pathetic it was for her life to be defined by the order of packaged food. Katie stared out the car window at the familiar surroundings as Mary drove. She was born and raised here, and it was the only place she called home. Mama's at the house, Mary said. She says to tell you to relax and quit worrying about your job. Katie scoffed bitterly. Oh, yeah, the last time she was home, she'd buried her nose in her work and stayed in her room. Mama had to pull her out to eat and make her take a break. They hardly had time to chat and catch up. Not much has changed, Katie said as they passed the elementary school where she had swung on the monkey bars. She remembered how high it had been and the time that she fell. So many memories. As Mary was a year older, they had the same teachers and knew each other's friends and classmates. She'd even had a crush on this kid who was in Mary's class, Brad. Was he still here? You remember the hot dog drive-in? How could I forget? Katie laughed. We used to work there, remember? We had to wear those silly uniforms. She'd cringed and wished she could hide after Friday night games when the football players and their dates pulled up and to the outdoor drive-in stands in their convertibles with the tops down. It was the hangout place in town. Some kids who knew her had teased her about her uniform, the striped top with the bright hot dog emblems. They weren't mean, though. As the car cruised down the one street through town, Katie mused. Main Street looks about the same. It was spring, Katie's favorite time of year. The last of the harsh winter was over. The dingy, snow encrusted streets swept clean by the spring rain. People were strolling and window shopping as new, colorful displays caught their eye. Others sat on the benches, enjoying the weather, soaking up the warmth of the sun. A few stores had their doors propped open to let the fresh air in, clearing out the stale air after months of being closed. Katie removed her sweater and let her arm hang out the window, feeling the sun on her bare skin. She closed her eyes and turned her face toward the breeze. There's the rent-a-formal, Mary said, passing the store. Oh, that reminds me. You're going to the wedding, right? Yes. No, I mean, I hadn't formally said I was going, but you told Mama. Katie shifted in her seat. You didn't RSVP to Lori? Katie shook her head. You need to call Lori and let her know you're coming pronto since you didn't send in your RSVP. Yeah, you're right. Now that I'm here, I'm looking forward to it. I haven't been to a wedding in years. I'll take you shopping. You need to get a dress and a gift for the wedding, Mary said. What are you going to wear? My pink dress. You've seen that. Going with Jim? Mary nodded. Jim was Mary's long-term boyfriend. They'd been friends since grade school. They'd been dating for years. Even mom and dad, when he was alive, eventually had stopped asking her when they were going to get married. Mary didn't mention it either, not anymore. She had ambitions of her own, and she wasn't ready to settle down. When she'd brought up her hopes and dreams with Jim, he had old fashioned ideas and was less than supportive of her aspirations. But Jim was comfortable, stable, and there were no surprises with him. What about you? Mary asked. It's a last minute decision. I don't have a plus one, Katie said, turning from Mary to hide the tremble in her chin. She allowed herself a moment to feel sorry before shaking it off. Katie was going by herself, not going to kid herself that a date would magically materialize one day before the wedding. She straightened her drooping shoulders. She would have preferred not to go alone, but this time she'd have to suck it up. Katie watched Mary stick her finger into the rotary dial of the old fashioned home phone before giving the handset to her. Katie pressed the receiver to her ear as the call connected. After some pleasantries, she gave her RSVP to Lori, who was delighted but didn't let her off the hook that easily. She asked if Katie had a plus one. Katie told her she didn't. Lori said she'd just spoken to the person for her. Katie paused when she heard who Lori had in mind, then hemmed and hawed before answering. Finally, she said, Okay, you're the bride. Katie sighed as she handed the receiver back to Mary to hang up. What was that all about? Lori had a fit. I didn't have a plus one. Mary knitted her brow. Oh, yeah? She has a thing about everybody pairing up for her wedding. Meaning you're not going? Mary asked. Meaning I agreed to go. Wait, you just said you didn't have a plus one. Right, I didn't. But now I do, Katie said. Explain to me, Missy. Okay, you know Lori's cousin Chase, the one who was in my class in high school? You mean your ex-boyfriend? Katie threw her an exasperated look. She didn't like being reminded he was her ex. Yes, but didn't he move away or something? Katie asked. He went away for a few years to college and work, but he came back about a year ago. Katie hadn't seen Chase since their breakup after high school. He was her first love. It'd taken her a long time to get over the hurt. She wasn't staying in town once she had her diploma. She'd worked hard for her grades and had gotten a college scholarship in the city. College was her ticket out of town. Chase had applied to her school but ended up with a scholarship to another college. They'd separated and gone their own ways. She didn't want to maintain a long distance relationship during college. Her focus was on her studies. It would be hard enough to juggle school and a part time job, but a relationship? She wasn't ready for it and couldn't deal with a long distance boyfriend. They fought. Chase tried so hard and even talked about giving up his scholarship to come to her school, but she wouldn't hear any of it and broke off their relationship. It was the last time they'd talked. It had been almost 10 years now, and she hadn't seen him since. Lori told me he's back in town, and she'd put Chase down as my plus one, Katie said. And you said? Well, I tried, but I can't say no to the bride, can I? Katie rolled her eyes, but she couldn't still the fluttering in her heart or hide the flush on her cheeks at the thought of Chase. What was he like now? Would she recognize him? Had he changed? She turned her face away from Mary as her thoughts of Chase turned private, the way his strong arms locked around her, the deep cleft in his chin, his boyish scent, the warmth of his lean fingers clutching her hand as they walked.